The departure of Gary had unleashed an unseen force that pulsed through the Harrison plantation, subtly but undeniably altering its rhythms. The dawn broke, the cockerel crowed, the sun claimed the sky, but the echo of Gary's defiance still lingered in the morning haze. The news spread like a swift river current, carrying a complex mixture of shock, fear, and audacious pinch of hope. Conversations became hushed whispers, and sideways glances were thrown with an unsettling frequency. In the fields, where the sun beat down with unyielding intensity, the absence of Gary was like a missing tooth, an empty space that disrupted the uniformity of the toil. Each swipe of the scythe, every bead of sweat that fell to the earth, seemed to whisper a singular word. The great house, too, wasn't spared from the ripple of change. Amy found her duties multiplied. Not only was she tending to Mrs. Harrison's needs, but she was also tasked with pacifying the mistress's increasing paranoia. Mrs. Harrison, once a picture of Southern sophistication, was now a woman consumed by fear of rebellion. "The others will follow," she muttered one afternoon, her eyes distant, her hands wringing her handkerchief into submission. "Gary has put ideas into their heads." Amy, ever the dutiful house slave, hid her own rising hopes behind a mask of indifference. "I don't reckon so, Mrs. Harrison," she replied, offering the woman a soothing smile. Gary was different. In the quarters, as dusk fell, the slaves huddled around the flickering firelight, stories of Gary's defiance circulating like prized folklore. "Do you reckon he made it?" Norris asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. John, staring into the hypnotic dance of the flames, responded with a quiet determination. "I hope so. Norris, for all our sakes, I hope so." A somber silence fell upon the group, each lost in their thoughts, Gary's ghost threading fear and hope into the fabric of their existence. He was gone, yet his influence was everywhere, a catalyst to their unspoken dreams, the spark to their hidden fires of defiance. The plantation was the same, yet irrevocably changed. The rhythm disrupted. The dynamic shifted, the status quo rattled. As they slipped into their straw beds that night, one thing was clear. Life on the Harrison plantation had taken a dramatic turn. The echoes of Gary's departure had barely begun to fade when the search for him commenced. Mr. Harrison was a stern man, used to obedience and control. The audacity of a slave daring to flee his dominion was an affront he could not tolerate. It gnawed at his pride and tested his patience, fanning the flames of his wrath. As dawn painted the skies with shades of pink and orange, the plantation buzzed with an unusual energy. The overseer gathered a search party, arming them with dogs and rifles, their steely determination mirrored in the metallic glint of their weapons. "We will find that boy," Mr. Harrison declared, his voice echoing through the crisp morning air, carrying a chilling promise. The slaves watched from the sidelines, their hearts pounding in their chests. Fear, like a shadow, stalked each one of them, whispering scenarios of what awaited Gary if he was caught. In the heart of this tension-filled scene, the nosy cat, always a silent observer, prowled around, its bright eyes taking in the commotion with an almost human curiosity. "Yeah, think they'll find him," Tricia whispered to Amy, their chores bringing them together briefly. Her eyes flickered with a strange blend of hope and dread. Amy paused, her gaze following the mounting search party. "I pray they don't," she confessed quietly, her voice barely audible over the commotion. She didn't need to elaborate. They both knew what Gary's capture would mean. Throughout the day, speculation swirled among the slaves, filling the air with an undercurrent of anxiety. They wondered if Gary had made it to the north or if he had found a good hiding spot. Rumors, built upon half-truths and full-blown fantasies, spread like wildfire. Every conversation, Every pause in their work, every shared glance carried the same silent question: where was Gary? By the time dusk fell, the search party returned empty-handed. Their frustrated faces were testament to the fruitlessness of their endeavor. The plantation breathed a collective sigh of relief, each slave silently thanking the heavens for Gary's continued evasion. But amidst the palpable relief, there was a tacit understanding. This was just the beginning of the hunt for Gary, and as the moon claimed the star-studded sky, the plantation sunk into a restless slumber, the specter of Gary's defiance lingering like an unfinished melody. The dawn after Gary's escape bloomed with an eerie silence. The plantation shrouded in the echo of his absence. It was as if the world itself held its breath, waiting for the storm that they all knew was inevitable. The rhythmic hustle of the plantation seemed out of sync, the rhythm of labor burdened with an undertone of tension. The news of Gary's disappearance had spread like wildfire, inciting a mix of dread and anticipation in the hearts of the slaves. It was all anyone could talk about. The usually relentless chatter of the field workers was replaced with hushed whispers, each word carrying the weight of the unknown. "Dirty Gary's gone," Norris muttered, breaking the morning silence. His words were met with a ripple of unease. "Yeah, think they gonna find him?" John asked, his voice barely a whisper. "No one knows," Tricia replied, her eyes not meeting anyone's. "No one knows what's gonna happen." The realization of Gary's absence sent tremors of fear through the Harrisons. Mr. Harrison was livid, his anger clear in his thunderous voice, echoing through the big house. "How did this happen? I want him found, now," he roared, pacing restlessly. Mrs. Adele Harrison, on the other hand, was eerily calm. "The more we react, the more they'll hope. We need to keep things in order," she said, her cold gaze sweeping across the plantation. The overseer, a brute of a man named Randolph, was brought in. His whip cracked ominously in the quiet of the plantation, a dreadful promise of the cruel changes to come. The following days were filled with an oppressive heaviness. The slaves were burdened with more work, the already back-breaking tasks amplified in the absence of Gary. The punishment for even the slightest misstep became brutal. Randolph's whip left its mark on more than one back, the pain a fierce reminder of their tragic reality. Paradoxically, the plantation began to operate more efficiently, running on the fuel of fear. Yet in the deepest corners of their hearts, amongst the dread and despair, the slaves held onto the glimmer of hope Gary had ignited.